everyone. I'm your host, Andrea Weckerly, and welcome to the Ready Living podcast, where each episode is designed to educate, inspire, and empower you to create the life you want. My guest today is Laurie Watkins. She's a transformational coach with a niche specialty in mental health sustainability, a former policy and political advisor to Barack Obama, a journalist, a cook, a mental health advocate and survivor, and the author of the health and wellness book, Go From Stressed to Strong. She spent the last 20 years solving policy and political puzzles, influencing large-scale change, and challenging the intersection between wellness and readiness in the workplace. With a curiosity for exploring other cultures through food, a gift for bringing people together around a common cause, and a goal of improving mental health outcomes in the food and beverage industry, she launched the nonprofit The Cooks Collective, which champions systemic changes that prioritize the mental health and well-being of the people who work in the food and beverage industry. Welcome, Laurie.
Hi, thank you for having me on your program.
Yeah, I'm super excited you're here today. And I was reading about your work, and the one thing that really seemed to pop out to me is that it sounds like you're not someone to shy away from identifying social problems that need fixing or speaking out and up for those who are vulnerable and helping those people who don't feel that they have a voice. In fact, on your website, I saw that you describe yourself as a catalyst for change. Were you always like that as a child, or is that something you developed later on in life?
I really enjoy the question. I would, if you were to ask my parents, I'm sure that they would confirm that, yes, I've been this way since I've been a child. But I think I can remember when I felt I was fully tapping into my power, probably when I was in high school.
High school.
Yeah, little middle school, adolescence, very unsure of who I was, figuring out, was very thin, often bullied for that, etc. I write about that in the book. Um, some people are bullied for being overweight. I was being bullied for being underweight, completely out of my control. And I think as I started to get older, and I reached high school, I started to come a little bit more into my own and feeling that confidence in being able to speak up when I saw that something was wrong or something needed change. And since then, I can say that even now, I am easily recognized as the person who get her to say what's on our mind that we're too afraid to say. If I see that somebody's uncomfortable and they want to say something, but for whatever reason, they're not speaking up, I have no problem jumping in. Obviously, I do that with respect and compassion and awareness of the other person. But yeah, that really led me into, I think, the policy and political track that I spent 20 years building and cultivating.
Right. So it sounds like this was really baked into your DNA, so to speak, as a young person, as a teenager, and maybe it was in development already before that through your own experiences, as you said. Did this desire to make an impact and a positive change reflect itself later on in the career choices that you made?
Oh, yeah, I would say that probably when I was in late high school, early college, I realized I started to feel that my purpose was service and service on behalf of others. And while I was, in undergrad, I was trying to change my major a bunch of times, thought I was going to be a business major. Then I changed to communications and marketing. And then I finally, what really changed everything for me was I went into the School of Social Sciences and I graduated with a degree in international affairs. And how I landed on that was I was in a sociology class, and one of the guest speakers was a British consulate general who visited our class, and his office was in Atlanta, Georgia. And I went to school at Florida State in Tallahassee. And so he came down and gave a lecture to our class, and it might have been diplomacy, it might have been the, policy aspect or politics, but I really gravitated towards his chat and thought to myself, wow, here's an individual that is having kind of worldwide impact on on a various, uh, you know, list of things, right? Whether it be community health, whether it be government and taxes and policy, whether it be people's well-being, whether it be, the requirements and rules and laws that fall around food and how things are made, et cetera, et cetera, everything that goes along with those kind of government type jobs. But as a consulate, this gentleman was focused on, a myriad of things. And I just thought that was very interesting. And I started to really focus on people in other countries, people in other lands, and how that relates and affects people here in the United States.
I want to talk a little bit about mental health now and switch to that. And I was reading an American Psychological Association survey conducted in April of last year, so 2023, and it reported that 76% of those surveyed said that work has negatively impacted their mental health. And you've publicly shared how you suffered a burnout back in 2008 while working at a job you loved. So, in your case, how did you recognize that you were experiencing burnout? Was there like a particularly event that made you realize what was happening, or were there several signs that cumulatively added up?
So I'll answer on a couple layers here for you. I'll give you some of my signs, and then I can also go into some signs to look out for.
Great.
The signs that I noticed within myself was I was losing my temper a lot. I was getting sick. It seemed like at the drop of a dime, like anyone came by me and sneezed, and I would feel that and wake up feeling unwell the next day.
Yeah.
I was less cogent. Um, I started having some physical effects. I was 28 years old at the time, well, 27 turning 28, and I started getting gray hair. Like a lot of gray hair started
Wow.
showing up during the campaign. Um, Presence, almost non-existent. It was focused for that moment and then on to the next thing, not really retaining anything. But I didn't realize it at that moment. It was many months later, but my family pointed it out to me at the time. It was October, so weeks before the campaign ended, the election, big election day. And my uncle, who had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 6 weeks before, passed away. And I had to go from Tampa, Florida, to where headquarters was, to Maine. And I gave his eulogy. And I was asked to do it, but I almost volunteered, I believe, from what I can remember. And I say that because when you're burnt out, also, you don't know your own boundaries and limits. That's part of the problem of why you're in this state. And you add on more things to your plate when really you should be eliminating things from your plate. So I add on the task of I'm away from headquarters for 48 hours. Oh, sure. Not, yes, I have work to do that's still going on, and people that are reporting to me from across the country. But let me write this eulogy. Let me take this on, right? So I'm writing this eulogy and I'm sitting in my uncle's reclining chair in my aunt's house. And somebody took a picture of me without me really realizing at the moment because it looked so absurd. And it was a picture of me sitting on that recliner with 2 laptops on my lap and 3 phones spread out across me. And no food had been really eaten that day, right? Not a lot of water. Was probably running on caffeine and adrenaline. And then a week after, or 2 weeks after that, my grandfather died unexpectedly. And I had to go, and deal with that. I did not give a eulogy, but I had to go deal with that and go back to Maine. And all of this happened within like a 3 to 4 week period before the end of the election. And I don't, it took me months or even years afterwards to have those memories of what actually occurred in those moments. It was all a blur at the time. I could not tell you any details. I could not recount things I said. I could not recount moments within the funeral per se, everything was an absolute blur. It was almost as if my physical body was there, but I mentally and spiritually and emotionally was somewhere else.
So it sounds like what what would be a really traumatic, mourning period in your life was suppressed because of all of these other pressures, real and potentially ones that you might have put on yourself, saying, "Well, wait a minute, I have obligations to that campaign. I have obligations to my team, and here I've got obligations to my family. What I've got to do was go, 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 go." And the person that wasn't honored in that process was you.
Yes, absolutely. I would agree with that. Yeah, and I'll say that the person who wasn't honored was me, and I believe going back to when you can telltale signs of burnout for me, or what I would say for other people, signals to look for is I even as I'm talking to you, I'm connecting the dots, and I think that one of the additional reasons I added that eulogy to my plate was so I would avoid the feelings, so I would avoid the traumatic event itself, because by keeping busy, by focused on by being focused on something else, you know, it helped me compartmentalize in that moment, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can relate to that. I know I can when there have been high stress situations. It's like I cannot afford to feel what I feel. I cannot afford to fall apart until, as you're saying a couple of minutes ago, until your body then says, well, wait a minute, you've pushed and pushed and pushed, and it starts coming out in other ways. And I want to take a moment just to read the dedication in your book, because I think it gets to this point too. And again, I'm quoting: "To all those who continue to put everything and everyone before themselves, this book was written for you. May you live consciously and deliberately, never allowing anyone or anything to come in between your ultimate health and happiness, even yourself." The even yourself part is so, so powerful. And I'm hoping, can you explain that a little bit further, what you meant by that?
What I meant was self sabotage, like you sabotaging your own well being, your own mental health, your own ability to process whatever it may be, particularly a trauma or a traumatic event. And you just keep putting it off, like I started to go into about my uncle's funeral, right? That if I just add this, then I won't have to focus on this, and it will help minimize or ease the pain or help divert my focus. And I want to bring up the word selfish. A lot of
Interesting.
a lot of
Selfish.
a lot of people in the or people that are opposed or critique the wellness industry or wellness um, mission or mantra. Some people say, well, that's, or you could even think it about yourself, right? Well, I'm not going to do that, or I can't do that for myself because that would be considered selfish. And selfish is really when you are in most alignment and in synchronicity and on the right vibration and plane with self. That is selfishness, is to be and act selfish. And it is not actually and it should not be taken as a negative or derogatory term. It has been used and made as such. And so to care for the self is has been coined the term selfish, but you need to be rock hard solid with your commitment to self, because if you are not, nobody else is going to. And we hear the expression, if there was an airplane's going down, the first thing that you do is take that oxygen mask and put it on yourself. Even if you have a child sitting in your lap or next to you, you have to put it on yourself first. And that is what I would like people to remember on a daily basis, is that, or use the analogy of a cup, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. And if that cup is empty and there's no water inside of it, but you are drowning in thirst and there's nothing to receive, then that is our telltale signs of burnout. And I just want to go back to some signs that people can look out for, because I mentioned I would say temper, presence. Are you present? Your health. Are you noticing that there are, you know, negative health factors that are cropping up in your life, that you're getting sick or your face is breaking out, or and I mean, this can go down to like eczema developing and rashes and all kinds of things, pains within your body that seem like something is wrong. And you could go to the doctor. This happened to me. Nothing's wrong with you. I'm like, what do you mean nothing's wrong? I don't feel well, right? And I know so many people that experience that. I have a friend that's experiencing it now and keeps running tests, and they keep coming back inconclusive or negative. And what really is going on is with the self. What's really going on is that you are not honoring yourself. You are not prioritizing your health and well being. And it has taken a toll, and you are spiraling out of control. And your body is giving you now physical signs. This is like the mayday. When you start
Yeah.
getting physical signs that your body is in crisis, in my opinion, and I'm not a physician, and I will have a disclaimer with that right now, you've already gone over the ledge, in my opinion. If those physical things are happening, you need to abort the mission. You need to seriously call in for reinforcements and ask for help. And I'll end this thought on that: is do not be afraid or ashamed to ask for help. You are not alone. There are so many people in our communities and our lives and our networks that are dealing with very similar things. And there are tools and help that is out there and resources, but you've got to be proactive. You have to want to take action to help yourself. And again, just like that empty cup, no one's going to do it for you.
That was so powerful, and I'm going to circle back on that a little later in our discussion. But I think you touched on a lot of important points. One of them being that this is happening to a lot of people out there, and in fact, I completely agree with you. It takes one person to say, "Well, wait a minute, I'm going through a tough time, or I'm feeling these things," and then in confidence, somebody else will say, "You know, well, I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but." I hear you. I'm feeling the exact same thing. So, for everybody listening to this, if you are going through a tough time, a mental crisis or mental challenges, and it's impacting you physiologically, on top of that, you're not alone. You know, this is a normal thing that happens to people who are going through undue stress, and it's not a sign of weakness for about the individual. It means this is what the body does to force you to recognize, wait a minute, something is not working and you need to change it. Otherwise, you are just going to completely destroy yourself. So, yeah.
And a couple more signs, Andrea, are habits. If you notice that you have changed your habits, okay, so you are
Mhm.
now sleeping less, you are now watching TV later every night, you are now waking up later, you are now drinking more alcohol, you have now turned to substance abuse to try to cope with some of these things. You have now turned to overeating, undereating. There are so many signs that only you know. Maybe maybe people in your life are noticing these as well. But I also find that people hide these changed habits. They are so aware of their changed habits that they start to mask them, and they become ashamed, and they start to feel, if somebody sees this, then they're going to know that I'm in trouble. Then they're going to know that I'm not well. And that is where you have to ask for help. At that very moment, that is the clear telltale sign that you are in trouble and you need to ask for help.
So it sounds like what you're saying is we also need to be really honest with ourselves in a compassionate sort of way. But we need to say, well, wait a minute, I'm doing things that I haven't been doing before. And these are not healthy things. These are coping mechanisms or self-medicating habits that I'm trying to do to push down or ignore what's going on in the surrounding areas, right?
Absolutely. During the campaign, I will tell you that first campaign in 2008, because in the book I write about how I changed my habits in 2012 based on what I learned and the tools that I had now in my toolbox. Yes, every night after work, every night. Didn't matter if it was a weekday, because on a campaign you're working, sometimes 14 to 16 hours a day. And it gets to a point where very quickly where it's 7 days a week.
Mm.
And so you want to have some freedom, some personal time, even if it's with your colleagues, right? And you want to go blow off some steam. Well, where did we do that? We did that at the bars. We would immediately lock up the door at headquarters and walk around the corner to the nearest place, and we would eat crappy food
Yeah.
and we would start drinking. And that drinking would then go into the wee hours of the morning, right? And so then that just has a cascading negative effect on your appetite, what you're putting into your body as far as food and your nutrition. Your sleep is going down the drain because you're spending all that time out at night. And you're putting now alcohol and a toxin into your body. Your time management is out the door, right? You're not
Yeah.
paying attention to that. You're going home when the bar closes. That's who's telling you when it's over for the night.
Mm.
And your stress management. That's one of the ways you're coping now with your stress is through alcohol and partying and eating food that's bad for you, etc. And then the other is exercise. Well, if you're not taking care of your health through physical fitness and you're not prioritizing that as time when you are away from your job, then all of these things will have a significant negative effect on you
Yeah.
very quickly. It doesn't take long.
Let me move on to the Cooks Collective now, and to note that your health journey was born out of your own experiences. You originally come from the world of politics and communication. So how did you end up founding the nonprofit Cooks Collective? What about the food service industry drew you in?
Yeah, so through my policy, well, the experience that I had with burnout, I realized that food was a huge component of that. Eating good, whole, nutritious food was a huge part of that. And so during the time when I was interviewing various high achievers for my book, one of the people I interviewed, two chefs, and one of them was Chef Jose Andres, the founder and chief feeding officer of World Central Kitchen, and also huge chef, restaurateur, very well known here around the world, but also here in the United States. But this was, many years ago, and the World Central Kitchen organization was pretty new at the moment, and ever since I was 15, I have been doing humanitarian work, mostly as a volunteer on my own, helping build houses, doing Bible study work, teaching English, etc. But this, through my work of starting to work with the World Central Kitchen, was really where food came into play. Food as hope, food as feeding people with dignity. And I started going on these missions and realizing that I had the skill set and the opportunity to what I had in the past studied or advocated for from a policy perspective. I was now on the ground, boots on the ground, in the field, seeing all of this come into play of the impact of nutritious food, not an MRE, food that is cooked by human beings
Yeah.
to give to another human being that is potentially in a disaster zone due to a, hurricane or a tornado or floods, or you're talking about one of the worst case scenarios, which is a conflict zone during war. And it could also be many times I've gone to the southern border to help feed people stuck in shelters and waiting to try to cross into the United States, etc. Near Syria, the Syrian border, and Turkey. I've been all over, and the one thing is the same. All of these experiences and the conditions and the locations and the people, yes, they're all different, but they are all the same, and that they are human beings, and they deserve to be treated with dignity. And the one thing, from the moment, Jose says this, from the moment you are born, without knowing anything, being taught anything, you know how to eat. You're born, and the first thing you know how to do is breathe and to eat. And so when you can feed somebody who is in a crisis situation and has lost absolutely all hope for their future or the future of civilization in their eyes, that meal, giving somebody a warm meal and feeding them with dignity, a smile will come across the person's face almost immediately. Not every time, but you know that they feel the impact, that you care, and that can make all the difference.
What I hear you saying is that this type of work is really a gift of love and, in fact, a gift of life.
Absolutely. And why I started the Cooks Collective is because this community of people who are chefs and cooks and industry workers are the most incredible group of people that I have worked with in my career. I've worked with tons of amazing industries and groups of people, the military, public servants, but children, but cooks and chefs and people that literally give up everything, will walk away from everything they have going on because they feel a calling to go and use their gift, their skill set, which is knowing how to cook and prepare a meal for another person. And these folks are most oftentimes the first to be called by communities when there is a disaster, when there is a crisis, or when there's a fundraising effort for whatever going on in the community. Hey, can you donate this? Can you cook this? But yet I have found they are the last. They are the last to ever ask for support, but they are the last that people think of as frontline civilians. And they are absolutely on the front lines, feeding people with the stress that comes to play inside and outside of restaurants, no matter what kind of atmosphere they are in, whether it's a food truck, whether it's a pop up, whether it's feeding under a tent in the middle of nowhere with, a propane tank and a grill. Like, folks will make it happen. And the love and the care and the empathy and the compassion has just, it was so moving that I decided to dedicate the next chunk of my career into lifting up this industry and these workers, because I feel that, again, as you started this conversation, a catalyst for change, I feel that they are oftentimes overlooked and their voices are not heard.
The Cooks Collective has an Instagram account, and on one of the posts, it says, if it costs your mental health, it's too expensive. And I remember earlier this year, WTOP published a story about the most stressful jobs, which mentioned that work conditions, stability, and safety are factors impacting mental health. And I was also listening to a recent interview you did where you talk about depression, drug and alcohol problems, and suicide within the food and beverage industry. So, for those who don't know, what specifically makes this job so hard?
I believe it's, again, we're talking about service. People are in service. They are serving food, whether they're cooking it or actually bringing it to the table and putting the plate down on the table for the person. And people judge or sum up or evaluate or review your food by the first bite. So it could take hours or days to prepare a dish, a specific dish, or a multitude of dishes. But it only takes 1 second, right, for that person to have that reaction or that opinion. And if it's negative, or if they don't like it for whatever reason and don't agree with it, and they send it back, or they say it's awful, or they say it was a wonderful meal, and then the next day you look and you have a horrible negative review on your website for your restaurant, and the person who you even visited their table and asked how everything was, who said it was great, they wrote a scathing review about the taste and quality of the food according to their opinion. Yes, everyone is entitled to their opinion. Of course, that's not what we're trying to say here. But when there is research that where scientists say it's more stressful to be a waiter or server than a neurosurgeon, that is very concerning to me. It's very concerning to the industry. 81% of chefs struggle with debilitating stress levels. 74% are sleep deprived to the point of exhaustion. 63% of chefs feel depressed. Exploding drug and alcohol addiction rates. Limited access to health insurance. Irregular work hours that make it hard to have and maintain a work-life balance. Potential exploitation with some employers of taking advantage of workers' vulnerable positions. A lot of people that work in this industry are not from this country, right? They migrate or immigrate here to this country, and a lot of those folks are taken advantage of by their employers.
Yeah.
And then this is the last one, the statistic I want to share, which really was the catalyst for the Cooks Collective, which is close to 80% of employees leave the industry after 2 years.
2 years. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So we are talking about, in those statistics, we are talking about trained professional chefs and cooks that have gone to school just like you and I did to get a degree, a certificate. They have learned a skill set painstakingly at times, very expensive, giving up years of their life of doing something else to learn how to do this and do it well. People open up businesses, dump every bit of life savings they have into opening up a restaurant. To then, the stress of it all, they close it within a few years because it's just too much, or they can't afford to pay their employees the living wage that they need to and want to because of rising costs. But like we were talking about, there's no prioritization at the federal level right now for health insurance, for mental health support services for this industry. That is a problem. And that is all like, comes full circle for me as a policy practitioner, is where I could see this in living color in front of my face of, hold on a minute. We're fighting for these policies, and these elected officials, they don't care about this. It's not a priority to them to make a vote that is a yes vote that would support the workers within their community, their constituents, but it's not a priority. But giving bailouts to, airline industries and auto industries and big pharma, et cetera, those are the priorities, unfortunately, of our elected officials, not just at the federal level, but at the state level as well. But I'm always going to leave on a positive note. But there are many states and many legislators that are doing incredible work, that are prioritizing. State of California, for example, just dedicated over $1 billion to adding mental health services to be included. They raised the minimum wage to $20. Was there an barrage of all these employees who left or were fired? No, there was a couple news stories where that happened. But at the end of the day, the industry didn't collapse. The world didn't fall apart. There are still restaurants and businesses and people that have remained in this industry. And you know what? More people are going to stay the course and stay in this industry that they love. And hopefully more are attracted to entering this industry because there is a noticeable change. And there are people like myself and my colleagues who are out there trying to move the needle forward on behalf of food and beverage industry workers.
The passion that you show for the people in this industry, I hope others listening to this are going to understand the dedication that people bring to this type of work, and the importance of it, and use you as an example for supporting them. I do know when I was in college, I had various server roles at different places. I worked in a bar as a bar back. I worked as a server in various restaurants, none of them super high end. And it was some of the toughest work I've ever done. And then, of course, touching on the financial aspect of it, we weren't on a salary. We were really dependent on tips. And I remember one time, the customers, they, for some reason, it wasn't lack of service on my part, that they didn't like the experience that they had. I remember they left me 6 pennies And I remember I had to fight back tears because I remember I would have rather had nothing, that they completely would have stiffed me as their server than 6 pennies. It was so painful. And I remember just having to step out and I cried. I was like, where do you think that this is okay? So everything that you said, Laurie, really resonates with me. And one of the things that I do is, if when I go out, I'm a good tipper. Why? Because I know what it's like. And I advise anybody, any young person or anybody, I say, if you want to see how hard people work, go into the service industry, is specifically the food service industry, and you are going to get a reality check. And then also, if you're out and about and if you want to know what somebody's character is like, how are they going to treat people in the service industry, and specifically servers and the cooks and everything else, the host and the hostess, you get to learn a lot about somebody.
Yes, and one mission and aspect of the Cooks Collective that's really important is to try and professionalize this industry a lot more than it currently is. I imagine, I don't want to speak for you, but I can imagine, just like any other industry for your listeners, that if someone were to leave you 6 pennies, if someone were to write on the receipt something unkind, disrespectful, again, it doesn't matter what industry, that impacts you. That stays with you. That can then start to demoralize you. It could start to eat away and erode at your confidence. It could start to affect the value you hold for yourself. These are monumental
Right.
effects that stay with people. And hey, if you're a bad server and this is happening all the time, maybe this isn't the industry for you. But that's not the case here. This is somebody taking out their anger or frustration or bad day or whatever they have going on out on this poor service worker who's trying to do their job and make sure that you are happy and have an enjoyable experience wherever you are, whether it's a fast casual dining establishment or it's a Michelin star restaurant, right? It should not matter how. I like what you said. Yes, it's about respect of how you treat another individual who is in the business of service. But that professionalism is really important for us to convey to people because, yes, I worked at restaurants when I was in college or transitioning. You expressed and shared your
Right.
stories. But for a lot of people, this is their career. This isn't some fast track to making cash or an in between transitionary job. This is what they want to do, what they have chosen to do, and this is their profession. And we need to treat them as such and start respecting people the same way we respect physicians and lawyers and technicians and electricians and engineers and architects and realtors. We need to respect them and hold them to the same respect level and standard as all others. And right now, I don't feel that we're at a place where I feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I love the way you put that. And so I guess that gets me to the next point I want to make, which is that we're both based in the Washington, D.C. area, a city that's known for being at the usual epicenter of national politics and global influence. And looking out for one's health isn't generally at the forefront of people's minds. So do we, and piggybacking on what you just said about professionalizing and recognizing the food and beverage industry and the workers who come from that, do we need to reframe what success looks like? Do we need to carve out alternative career paths that blend professional achievement with mental and physical health? And what would that maybe look like?
So, success in, for me, but what I like to use in my consulting and coaching of other individuals is really personal fulfillment, accomplishment, impact, joy, well being, peace. Do you feel good about what you are doing on a daily basis? Is it bringing you joy? Do you feel like you are part of something bigger than yourself, that you are making impact? If you can say yes to those things, then I would consider you a successful person. Success is not how many commas are in your bank account. Success is not how large your house is or how many things and knickknacks and objects that you have. It is about, do you feel whole and well within yourself? Do you feel good at the end of the day? And do you feel good while doing it? Meaning healthy. Or are you turning to negative things, right? To feel good. Those are artificial. Those are tangible. Those are not within yourself. Again, you are going outside yourself, looking for outside sources to make you feel successful. That's not success.
I want to now turn to a slightly personal note. And when I invite people to the podcast, I always like to learn a little bit about them personally. And this is something you shared on, I think, your personal Instagram account. But I read that you're a
Yes.
dog mom to 11-year-old
Whiskey
Whiskey
Bravo, yes.
Bravo. Uh, and in a recent Instagram post, you shared such a sweet tribute to him and the important role he plays in your life, where you wrote, and is it okay if I
Sure.
read what you wrote? Yeah.
This is so unexpected.
It
I
was
love it
so
though.
sweet. It was so sweet. You wrote that he's given you an entire decade of unconditional love, friendship, and pure joy. This sweet little boy's been there for me through countless nights when I cried myself to sleep and through some of the most traumatic events I was sure would finish me. He gave me purpose to go on. That was so moving when I read that, and I started choking up because I have had enormously strong bonds with my companion animals. Um, can you tell us a little bit about him? To like, what is, he's such a powerful force in your life. I want people to hear about
So
this.
I have had him for 10 years. He's 11. I got him. They say he was about 1 year old. And I rescued him.
Mm.
And his older sister, my former dog who lived to 14 and a half, we were walking through a park. And as she got older, she wasn't really interested in any other dogs, like wanted to be by herself. But she went right over to him and her tail started wagging. And I know that she brought him to me. And we were in Meridian Hill Park here in Washington, D.C. And I said, "Oh my gosh, what kind of breed is he? He looks like he could have part beagle in him. What is he?" And they're like, "We're not really sure. We're actually fostering him." And I said, "What?" And I said, "Which rescue?" And they told me City Dogs. And there's a shout out to them in Washington, D.C., a great rescue. And they said, "We're not sure." And I said, "This dog is up for adoption." I said, "Oh my gosh, I'd already applied. I'm going to go home and make sure that I can get on the list and that he is mine." And he is mine. And he has been with me. He goes everywhere with me. He flies on airplanes. He goes on boats and in the snow, and he goes everywhere. He loves everything. He is an old soul. For those spiritual listeners of yours that will understand this and this will resonate, he is absolutely an old soul. There's no other way to explain it. He even communicates by doing a little bit of talking, but his presence, the way he is, his eyes, just how loving and kind he is, he can pick up. He's very sensitive. He picks up when people are not doing well, when they need a nudge or a hug or a cuddle or whatever it is, he knows. But every single person that meets him says the same thing. This dog is so special. That's what they say. And they have no information before meeting him to qualify that statement, but it's a feeling that they get. And I am not yet a mother, but I will be to a human in my future. And he is. I know that my higher power has put him in my path to prepare me for that. 100%.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I do want to mention a resources that I have available for listeners. It's a free workbook called Secure Your Companion Animal's Future that guides you through the 3 things you need to do to make sure your companion animals are taken care of for the rest of their lives, even if something happens to you. And you can get it at the URL readywhenstuffhappens.com/learn. So if anybody's interested in that, go to that URL, get it. I think you're going to find it very valuable. And so I think that's a good place to end things. But before we go, Laurie, please let people know where they can find your book and where they can help support the important work of the Cooks Collective.
Yes. Well, you can always visit my website. Would love to see you in our community. It's www.LaurieAWatkins. So that's LaurieAWatkins.com. You can find where to purchase my book. It's at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, etc. But all the links are there. And then you can visit us and please join our community as well at the Cooks Collective, which is thecookscollective.org.
Laurie, thanks so much for taking the time today. I know people will get a lot from what you've shared.
Thank you so much for having me on your program, and stay strong, everyone.